people tell me I have a face for radio, and I agree. So there you go. This is Tony, the Geeky Agent from RE/MAX. I just want to sort of quickly touch base with you. You know, most people, if you've been watching this feed, know I've been doing this series called The Lunchbox. We are on, this is technically episode number 8. So if you want to be that formal about it, season 1, episode 8. And all I really wanted to chat with you about today was the difference between a deposit and a down payment. Unfortunately, it seems like a lot of people don't know the difference. And what I'm running into as a real estate agent who gets a lot of referral business from partners from Toronto, Niagara, you name it, out of province, from the States, everywhere in this area seems there's people that want to move into the Hamilton area, which is fantastic. We love always welcoming new people to the city, get them to enjoy everything that Hamilton has to offer, which, depending who you talk to, is a lot or a little, I'm not sure. It's a great place to be, but here's one of the problems that we run into. So what is the difference between a down payment and a deposit? I think most people know what a down payment is. So if you're looking to purchase a house and you are going to obtain a mortgage, the lender, whether it's a bank, a mortgage broker who sets you up with a lender, which could be a bank, a credit union, a private lender, some type of person who's setting up a private mortgage for you, that kind of thing. Generally speaking, at the beginning of that mortgage, you need to put down what is called a down payment. So for example, if you were purchasing a house that was $300,000, you agreed to pay $300,000 for this house. According to Canadian mortgage rules here in Ontario, the way it works is that you need a minimum of a 5% down payment. So that means that you need $15,000. 5% of $300,000 is $15,000 that you give to the lender. So if you're going to your bank to obtain the mortgage, because you don't have $300,000 to give the seller, you give the bank $15,000 as a down payment, and they give you the balance of the mortgage, which on $300,000 is going to be, do the math, $285,000. So the bank takes your money as a down payment, takes the extra money, and they give $300,000 to the seller, and then you're on the hook to pay off the balance of this mortgage. So that's the down payment portion of it, right? Now, there's a bunch of things that come into play if you have less than 20% of a down payment. So on a $300,000 house, that would be $60,000, $20,000 for every $100,000, 20 times 3, $60,000. If you have less than that, you have to, the bank will want to get insurance against your mortgage to make sure that, if you fall into a default, they don't want to get left holding the bag, like 95% of the value of this house. So they go to things like CMHC and Sagan and what used to be Genworth to get this mortgage. And then usually a lot of those are backed by the Canadian government. So that's a different thing, and you'll pay like an insurance fee that goes with it. But that's basically what a down payment is. So that's going to the lender. So what's a deposit? Now, this is money that you need up front. The down payment you actually don't need until the closing date. So if you put an offer in on a property today and it was accepted today, and you had agreed to take possession of that house or have the completion date, or what most people call the closing date, to be on, let's say, June 30th. That down payment is due from you to the lender. Usually you give it to your lawyer and it goes through that way, and the banks all sort it out on June 30th. So that money has to be in your account on June 30th. The deposit is needed right now. So when you're looking at an offer, and when I'm looking at an offer on the Realtor copy, the back end that has all the specific instructions about offer days and who the actual sellers are, how to prepare an offer, who to submit it to, what schedules to include, and all that sort of stuff. On the back end, it also says the deposit amount that the seller is looking for. So on that $300,000 house, they might include something like, at this point, $10,000. So what they want to know is the seller wants you to provide, the buyer, to provide a $10,000 deposit as basically good faith money. And the way this works is that, number one, you're not legally required to provide a deposit. Once upon a time, when you submitted an offer, that money, that good faith money, a surety, or what used to be called consideration, was actually required for the contract to be legal. It was one of the pillars of a legal contract. The laws have changed, and now basically when you look at a standard, or what has become a standard agreement of purchase and sale in Ontario, there's a little spot there that looks like a printed seal. It looks a lot like those old wax seals that they used to use on documents you see in old-timey movies. They melt the wax and they stamp it and they show that it's official and it's been sealed, only it's just printed in black ink. So it's a little star and it looks like a little seal. But legally speaking, you are signing under seal when you sign that contract, and that makes it a legally binding contract whether or not a deposit is applied. If the seller agrees that the deposit could be $0, then you still have a legally binding contract. Normally, however, or what is most common, is that the seller does want some upfront money. So they want that money just in case something happens. It's kind of the same reason that the bank takes out insurance if your mortgage amount is pretty low. The bank has your house as collateral, and they've got that insurance in case you were to default on your mortgage. They could repossess your house and sell your house and try to get back the money they gave for that mortgage. With an offer, an agreement of purchase and sale, you give that deposit money, and what happens is, so if we had an accepted offer this evening, and we agreed to provide the $10,000 that the seller is requesting, that deposit money is required to be given by the buyer, generally speaking in the form of a bank draft, a certified check, and at this point now, since COVID, it's become more common to do things like wire transfers and that sort of thing. But it needs to be provided to the seller's listing agent's brokerage. So I work at Remax, and if we were buying a property that was represented by one of my colleagues, let's say at Royal LePage or another Remax office, the buyer has to provide that deposit money to that listing brokerage. That brokerage holds that money in trust. They don't use that money. That money gets held in trust until the closing date, and then it gets applied to your down payment. So if you owed, like I mentioned previously, that $15,000 down payment, that $10,000 that you gave as a deposit actually counts as part of that $15,000 down payment. It is held in trust by the real estate brokerage, and a number of different things. So it depends on the scenario, it depends on the structure of the agreement of purchase and sale. So if you have a conditional offer where you've said, you've agreed and the sellers agreed to allow you to do a home inspection, you wanted your mortgage financing condition included. If you're buying a rural property that has a septic system or cistern and you wanted the water tested and the septic system tested, a wet inspection, WETT inspection for a wood-burning fireplace or wood-burning stove, any of these kind of things, a termite inspection, you wanted a condition to make sure you could get insurance, all that kind of stuff. Anything that's conditional, you still need to provide the deposit up front, but the way those conditions are generally written is in such a way that if that condition is not fulfilled, let's say you do the mortgage financing and you can't get approved for a mortgage, or you do the home inspection, you find some real problems with it and you can't negotiate a solution with the seller, so you decide not to buy the property, or you do a septic inspection and it reveals issues that you're just not willing to deal with, etc. If the deal comes to an end, generally speaking, if everybody's acting in good faith, that entire deposit, that entire $10,000 is released by the brokerage that was holding it and returned to the seller in full without deduction. Like the actual terminology in the condition says in full without deduction. So you get that $10,000 back. If you decide to proceed with the transaction, then again, they continue to hold it in trust. And on the closing date, on the completion date, they apply those funds towards whatever your down payment is supposed to be. Now, the other thing that could happen is, like, say you put in a firm offer, or you do your conditions and you're happy with everything and you decide to proceed with the purchase. So at that point, that's when the real estate agent usually puts the sold sign up on the for sale sign. They put the sold rider on it, and the property is listed as being sold in the MLS system. It disappears from realtor.ca. From that point on, you're actually, you haven't taken possession yet. You're waiting for that closing date. So that conditional period is usually only like a week long, at most 5 days to a week long. So if we had an offer accepted today, we'd have 5 days to a week, probably till next Friday, to do up all our conditions, to do our home inspection, get our mortgage approved, whatever we need to do, and let them know whether or not we're going to proceed or negotiate any changes to the contract. And then once it's firm, you have a binding agreement with the seller. The buyer has a binding agreement with the seller. Now, if the buyer gets cold feet, sometimes things happen. They lose their job. They just get cold feet, decide they don't want to buy a property. Now the market's shifting a little bit. Some people get a little bit nervous that maybe I paid too much money for my house, and maybe I don't want it. This was a bad idea, kind of thing. And they want to get out of this transaction. They have a binding agreement with the seller. They have to complete this transaction. If they try to get out of this transaction, generally speaking, they are in breach of contract. There are different scenarios that play out here. So, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so don't take this as legal advice. But from my experience and my understanding, if you don't fulfill the terms of a contract, you are in breach of that contract. Generally speaking, with real estate agreements, that deposit that you provided, that $10,000 deposit, becomes what's referred to as liquidated damages. And the seller can basically claim that deposit almost immediately. It's essentially, I could be mistaken, I believe it's just like a summary judgment type of thing, and that $10,000 is released to the seller as what's called liquidated damages. So from the seller's perspective, they want to know that they have that assurance there that you're going to close the deal. If your deposit is really small, like $500, and you're faced with the prospect as a buyer who's got cold feet of purchasing $1 million property, you know, what's the worst thing that you could do? Is like they figure, I could just lose the deposit, I'll walk away from $500. That's not true, because you can still get sued for a lot more money. So that's a strong and very prevalent misconception, that you don't just lose your deposit. You can be sued for much, much greater damages than that. And we'll talk about that in a different video. But immediately up front, you do lose that deposit. So a seller really wants you to have as large a deposit as possible to give them as much assurance as possible that you're going to complete the transaction. So from a competitive bid situation, so if you're in a bidding war and you're going up against a number of other offers and stuff, one of the things that a buyer can do is to have a much more substantial deposit as a guarantee to the seller that, no, we are serious and we are planning to complete this transaction. I have seen deposits of $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 and even more, as you know, it's going towards the purchase of the house anyways. And if you've got those funds available up front, you can provide that up front. It has to be liquid because it has to be delivered to the seller's brokerage within 24 hours, generally speaking. You can actually make your offer stronger by having that much larger deposit. A lot of agents don't think about that. A lot of sellers don't consider it, but once they're presented with that information and they see that and they see that security there, they may even be willing to take an offer that's slightly lower, but has that extra guarantee that, no, these guys are actually serious and they are actually going to complete the transaction, because a higher offer that doesn't get completed isn't worth anything. It isn't worth as much as a slightly lower offer that you're more assured is actually going to reach completion, the property is going to close, and the buyers are going to be there on closing day to pay their bills, basically. So that's generally how it works. Again, the issue with the deposit is that a lot of people who have just sold their properties. So you've just sold a property. You might be in the Toronto area, even in the Hamilton area here, and you sold your property for more money than you ever thought you could. And you've got all this money that you're waiting for, because you don't get that money. You don't even get the deposit that was put on your house until the closing date. Like, none of that money is available to you until the closing date. So you've got this property sold, and now you want to go and look for a house to buy. But if you don't have money in the bank to cover that deposit that's needed right up front, you're not going to have a very successful time looking for a house. The sellers are expecting to receive that deposit. So if you don't have one, it's very difficult to submit an offer. Again, there's nothing legally stopping you from doing it. But if all that you have to offer is like $1,500, and legitimately because all the money that you have is tied up in your house, that's not really any security type guarantee for the seller, because there's a possibility, and this happens occasionally, where the person that bought your house, maybe they get cold feet. So this money that you're waiting for from the sale of your property might not materialize, which then means that the seller, really the only liquidated damages that they could claim right up front might be that $500,000 $1,000, $1,500, which really doesn't help them with the house that they were trying to purchase. So you see there's like a domino effect here. So if one person backs out of a deal, the person whose house they were buying, generally that person, not always, but majority of the time that I've been involved with, they're out buying a house as well. So then they're waiting for the money from you to buy their house, and then that person's waiting for that money to go buy their retirement home or move to their cottage or give it to their kids or whatever. And there's a chain of events there. So one little domino that tips over sends everybody tumbling. So that's kind of how deposits work. That's why they're generally seen as important and why they can be used, or how they can be used as leveraged in a bidding war. So hopefully that makes sense. It's a very quick run through. Again, it's just a lunchbox. We don't really spend a ton of time here talking about a lot of stuff. It's just a quick lunchtime little thing. If you have any questions, please always feel free to leave them down below. I'll try to follow up and answer any I can. Send me a private message if you're interested in what's happening in your neighborhood. Like different neighborhoods right now in Hamilton, if you're in that lower price range, like anywhere from $400,000 to $600,000 price range, it's still very, very busy, very active. A lot of competition still happening. If you're up above 700,000, 7, 8, 900,000, it's slowed down a little bit. There are a few properties that are sitting around. They are selling, but a little bit more inventory has come on the market, so buyers have a little bit more choice. It's still very much a seller's market. You're still commanding a premium, but the tactic of pricing a bit low and then holding off on offers with an offer date isn't always working in that price range at this point, because again, there's some more inventory on the market. As soon as that inventory gets absorbed and there's more buyers back in the market again, chances are that pressure will pick up again and you'll see more competitions again. There is always that little bit of ebb and flow, literally week by week, definitely month by month throughout the year, any given year. Even if the prices are significantly higher in December than they were in January, throughout the year there's that monthly fluctuation where you'll see the average price bump around depending on what's been sold and how many buyers are in the market, how much inventory, fluctuations in the interest rate, announcements by various levels of government on TV, and all that sort of stuff happening, whatever's in the news, if there's a good Netflix show on, who knows? There's all kinds of things that impact real estate, that impact the stock market, that impact our daily lives. So I do appreciate you all tuning in. I'll stop talking because I'll just be rambling and repeating myself. It is actually a very nice Friday afternoon so far. It is a little bit warmer than it has been. It's super, super windy out here in Binbrook, which is in the furthest southeast corner of Hamilton for all of you keeping track. But yeah, hopefully you get a chance to get out this weekend. It's going to be a bit rainy, still a little bit cool. Not quite the May 2-4 weekend everybody waits for to start planting flowers and gardens and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, maybe get out and reseed your lawn and pull out some weeds and clean stuff up that was left over from the winter. Who knows? Hopefully you have a great weekend either way. I love y'all. I really do. I do appreciate you tuning in. And as always, thanks for being here for the Lunchbox, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now.